Attendees in Davos at the World Economic Forum. And yes, as we talked about earlier, it is that time of year again. And this time, a big topic of conversation there is a theoretical disease X that could result in 20 times more fatalities than the coronavirus pandemic, they tell us. It's creepy because the last time China, Bill Gates, and other WEF figures were talking about pandemic responses, we got COVID in short order. Are they setting the scene for something similar to happen again? I know they tell us that Wuhan lab leak, that it's a fake conspiracy theory, but they don't believe that themselves. Just look at their emails behind closed doors. And also look at this headline from the Daily Mail. It says, Chinese scientists create a mutant coronavirus strain that attacks the brain and has a 100% kill rate in mice, as they admit there's a risk it spills over to humans. Yeah, wonderful stuff. Instead of collecting viral samples from bats in faraway caves and then performing gain-of-function experiments on them in Wuhan, now it's pangolins, which have been harvested for samples of a virus known as GXP2V. These were then used by Chinese scientists in Beijing, linked to that country's military, of course, to infect mice, which were themselves altered to express the human ACE2 receptor, which COVID was also mutated for in order to gain entry into our bodies. The infected mice had a 100% death rate within about a week or so. Symptoms of the brain disease include eyes turning white, a hunched posture, sluggish movements, severe weight loss, and goosebumps. It gets even scarier when you realize our government gave even more money in the past year to groups like EcoHealth Alliance to go scour remote parts of the Philippines for more animal viruses to quote-unquote study. Well, we also saw that illegal Chinese biolab in California last year being covered by the feds, they covered it up and they ordered all the samples of those dangerous diseases to just be destroyed. They weren't too interested in investigating. And then there's that giant lab being built in Colorado to also study dangerous bat viruses in conjunction with Chinese scientists. Joining us now to discuss is military defense attorney Davis Yance. Davis, thanks for being here tonight.
Hey, good evening.
Chris, I don't know about you, but I'm getting pretty tired of these scientists sticking their noses where they shouldn't and then not even asking for forgiveness when they unleash hell on the rest of us, like with COVID. But what do you make of Chinese scientists experimenting with making pangolin viruses able to cross over into human cell receptors? Doesn't this kind of remind you of a COVID do-over?
Yeah, it absolutely feels like a COVID do-over. And the question becomes very, very quickly, what is the purpose? What is the intent? What nation in the world would support this type of dangerous gain-of-function research unless they were trying to make a bioweapon? That's the biggest concern I have, because we know now COVID resulted from a lab leak, and there was gain-of-function research being done there, and it was in part being paid for by grants from the United States government. And again, we continue to give billions of dollars to overseas entities and other grants, and we don't police. We've learned we don't police at all where that money goes or whether or not these organizations are working with the Chinese government or other enemies. So again, the question becomes, why? What is the purpose of this? This kind of a dangerous virus, this isn't do anyone any good when it comes to research. The result is something very, very dangerous.
It is, and of course there is a historical precedent for it. For those who know World War II, Japan, some of their scientists, right, a lot of them were quite similar to the Nazi scientists, if you can even call them that, right, doing very, very grotesque experiments on humans. Basically experiments that the poor people in these cases, these subjects, were not expected to survive. It was just to see what would happen. And so the Japanese did this to the Chinese in the Second World War, and they would release what was it, the Black Plague, right there, Yersinia pestis, that's the word I was looking for. It's the name of the bacteria. They would release it onto these rats, let them go run amok and trying to infect villages. They would release chemicals into the water. It sounds like funky sci-fi kind of stuff, but sadly, it has happened. I know there's also concern in recent years, right, about the Ukraine-Soviet era biolabs and now being in the middle of a war. Also some fears that with Russia being put into a corner, sanctions and all the rest, and them getting a lot cozier to China. Well, what is China like? Obviously, there's a lot of experiments going on in China, and Russia and our CDC are the only two places on Earth, right, where smallpox still exists in little samples. So then the fear was, well, maybe Russia cozying up to China, they said, hey, we'll give you some of our smallpox samples. So there's a lot of fear, like you said, with these bioweapons.